Hi, my name's Nikola and I'm the founder of Little Miss So and So, an online fabric shop and subscription specialist. This is my sewing studio and welcome to Midweek Makes. Every week I like to sew a project with you. This may be from one of our subscription clubs, one of our patterns, and it might even be an exclusive pattern that we've put together just for our YouTube subscribers. This week I'm going to be introducing you to one of our Kids Sew 2 boxes. So Kids Sew 2 is a subscription that I started up out of my love for teaching children. I used to teach children when we had a physical shop in Eastbourne Town Centre. We used to have an after school club, and now I get to do that virtually and it works really well. The Kids Sew 2 subscription is a monthly subscription that gets sent out once a month, and in it are fat quarter projects. So in the box is a selection of fat quarters, notions, and all the bits and bobs you need to make the project, along with a video tutorial. Today, because it's Christmas and I haven't had a minute to think, I'm going to be sharing with you our most recent Kids Sew 2 video, and it is to make this crown, which is adjustable, and it's made out of these gorgeous wintry fabrics from Lewis and Irene called the, I don't even know why I think I'm going to remember things when I'm this tired. Don't you just love pre-Christmas tiredness? It's called the Secret Winter Garden. There you go, I got it. The fabrics in this crown are absolutely stunning. They're metallic and it all depicts the secret winter garden. We've lined it with another pearlescent fabric from the same collection, and it's more of a winter crown. It doesn't have to be Christmas. If you don't celebrate Christmas, it doesn't matter. It can just be a wintry crown that can be used all year round. But I do want to share with you the making of this pattern. We've got the tabs at the back that are applied to make the adjustable sizing, and for the children to make this, it's a brilliant project. So our children within the club have been amazing. They follow the video tutorials really well and send us pictures of what they've been making, and I talk to them every month about various sewing techniques. So on this crown there's a lot of techniques that you'd be amazed at how well children adapt to sewing and pick projects up. There's lots of pivoting around the corners. So they're going to be sewing this crown together and doing lots of straight lines and pivoting around the corners. Also clipping in to the points so that when it turns through, we've got nice flat points. They're also going to be attaching the velcro. And also we've got a little pattern amendment to do, and it's just a tiny little one, but we talk through that whole process within the video. So I'm going to show it, I'm going to share it with you so you can see what our children are following to make these projects. But they are absolutely amazing. I love the fear factor with children, i.e. there is none. If I talk to them about top stitching and how to do it, they just go and do it. So it's amazing. Children just, I think they just hear a set of instructions and go ahead and do it. So I hope you enjoy this video. I want you to see how this crown gets put together, but also the sort of tutorial that the children are learning from, because we've got loads of wonderful examples of how well children are doing. And I'm super pleased with it. So there you go. That's our midweek make, making this rather gorgeous winter crown. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you back next week where I've got a really exciting project that I'm planning to share with you. Okay, thanks. Speak soon and enjoy this. Okay, so to get started, the first thing we need to do is cut our pattern piece out. So it's just one pattern piece for this project, and we need to use 2 of our fat quarters and a piece of interfacing. Now, you may have already noticed that on this project there's a teeny tiny mistake in that our pattern piece doesn't quite fit on the fabric. So it says here we need to cut 1 on the fold in the main fabric. So this is my fabric folded in half and this is my fold. So I need to cut 1 of this pattern piece out on this fold. I need to cut 1 in the fold of the lining, so that's my second fat quarter piece, and 1 on the fold in the interfacing. So those of you who have been with us a little while, you know that when cutting out a pattern piece on the fold of the fabric, each pattern piece has got a fold line just here, and it tells you that you've got to line up this edge on the fold. So my fabric's folded in half. Now, this tab here is hanging off the fabric. So there's a really quick way that I'm going to show you that we're going to adapt this pattern so that it will fit on the fabric. We're going to do this by, oh, just dropped my ruler. Okay, we're going to do this by cutting this tab off and then cutting it separately. So let me just move this fabric out the way. So what we're going to do, we're going to just measure 1 centimetre in, because we're sewing with a seam allowance of 1 centimetre, and we're going to just make a little dotted line. This is where we're now going to cut along. I'm going to chop this tab piece off, and then I'm just going to, I can't write upside down, I'm just going to make a note that says add 2 centimetres and a little arrow. Okay. Then we're going to chop this off. So that is now a separate pattern piece, and I'm going to talk about this in just a second. Let's get this back on here now. So now that I have chopped that piece off, we can cut this out. It fits nicely. Perfect. So you're going to just need to pop a couple of pins in and cut all the way around the edge of your crown so that when you fold it out, you've got one long piece of crown. Now this, because we were going to, this was attached, we now need to cut 2 of these out, but we also need to add 2 centimetres, and we're going to add 2 centimetres because we're going to have 1 centimetre for the bit that we've just left hanging on here, and also 1 centimetre seam allowance. So I'm just going to demonstrate now. We need to cut 2 of these. I might just put in brackets, cut 2. We need to cut 2 of these out now because we need one for each side of the crown. And very simply, we're going to, I'm going to use a pen on fabric only for demonstrating. You won't need to do this, but I'm going to do it just so that I can demonstrate this piece. We're going to cut. We're going to draw around that pattern piece. We're going to add on 2 centimetres. There you go. There we go. Oh. Right, so there is my new pattern piece. So I'm going to cut out, I'm going to cut around that square, which is going to make 2 pieces because my fabric is folded in half. And then I'm going to be cutting one of these out on the fold. And I'm going to do exactly the same with this and this with the lining fabric, okay? So I'm going to go cut mine out, and then we will come back here and we'll see what pattern pieces we've got left. So we now have our crown pieces. So if I take the pattern piece off the lining that I've just cut out and open it out, there you go. So there's one piece, and we've got the 2 tab pieces that we've cut off, and then we're going to stick them back on. So these are going to be sewn on to each side. We're going to just sew along right sides together. So I'll come on to that in just a moment, but just so you can see what these pattern pieces now look like. So we've got the long crown, we've unfolded it, and we've got the 2 tab pieces that we've chopped off, and we're going to sew back on. So all we need to do now is just do the same for the interfacing. So I'm going to get my piece of interfacing. This is plenty wide enough. So I'm going to pop this onto the fold, and I need my tab piece. There it is. Okay, so you can either cut around it, or if you just want to draw around this bit just to remind you where that tab piece is. There we go. So I know that I've just got to cut around that as well. There you go. So I'm going to cut all the way around the pattern piece. But for this one, I'm sticking the tab piece back on because we've got plenty of room in the piece of interfacing. There you go. So if you continue cutting out your interfacing piece, and for those of you who are new, interfacing, this weird piece of fabric, which you can see is shiny on one side and matte on the other side. We use interfacing quite a lot. The shiny side is the glue side, and the matte side is obviously it's the non-glue side. So when this gets stuck to fabric, and we do it with an iron, so you always need a grown up to help you, but it's the shiny side that goes against the back of the fabric. So if you've got the wrong side of a fabric, it's this shiny side that sticks down, and it will stick, and it makes the fabric a little bit stiffer, so not so floppy. So that's basically what interfacing is. Okay, so just cut the rest of that pattern piece out, and we'll move on to sewing our tabs back on. So we've now got all of our pieces. I'm going to pop the interfacing aside for just a second whilst we work on putting our tabs back on. So if you've got a couple of pins or clips, you're going to need these. So we're going to put our tabs, you can see this, there we go. We're going to put them on right sides together. So you just zoom in a bit so you can see, there we go. So this little tab piece on the end, we want to stitch it back on. So we're going to put it right sides together and just pop a pin round about there just to hold it in place. And we're going to sew it along that a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So that little bit there is what we left to use as a seam allowance. So we shall sew, in fact, just so it's clear for people who are new, it's going to be down this line. So there we go. Oh, bit wonky. When you use the sewing machine, it'll be a lot straighter. So we're going to sew it together along that pink line, and the same on the other side. Okay, so place the tab right sides together, pop a pin in to hold it in place, and we're just going to sew along that 1 centimetre seam allowance just there. And we're going to do exactly the same for our lining piece. We've got one of the tabs, and they're going to be put on one side. I'm going to pop a pin in here. And the same on the other side. And then I'm going to sew those in place, and I will show you once they're sewn in place how it's all going to look. So once you have sewn your tabs back on, we'll take the pins out, and you can see that everything is as it should be. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn them open, and we're going to go over to the iron. Now this is where you'll need a grown-up to help you. We just need to open up these seams that we've just sewn and give them a press. So all of those on both sides of the main crown piece and the lining crown piece, they just need to be pressed open. Okay, so here's my lining piece. I'm going to press those open with an iron. And whilst we're at the iron, with your sensible person, grown up, we're going to stick the interfacing to the back of the main crown piece. So we're going to give those seams a press open, and then we've got our interfacing piece, and I've got my shiny side here, I can see it. So I want my shiny side to be facing the wrong side of my crown. And I'm going to pop that on top. And I'm going to use the heat of an iron to press it in place. Now, mums and dads and nanas and granddads and whoever's helping you, those sensible grown-ups, you may want to use a pressing cloth to stop, well, to prevent your iron from sticking to anything, because it can be known that us sewers like to mess up irons with things like interfacing. So as long as you use a hot iron, a pressing cloth will help in between your iron and this, just to make sure everything's as it should be, and we're not going to be damaging your iron. Okay, so we're going to stick that interfacing shiny side down to the wrong side of the main piece of fabric for your crown. And then once you've done that, if you wanted to decorate your crown with anything, now is the time to do so. I'm not going to decorate my crown, I'm going to leave it as it is. But if you would like to add any jewels or sew anything on, or any sequins, or draw on it, or use any of the bits and bobs that came in your box, then just have a nice, once you've stuck that interfacing on, then is the time to do your decorating. Okay, so we're going to meet back here once you've done all that, and we're going to do some sewing. So now we've attached the interfacing to the right side of the crown, and you might have decorated your crown with some jewels. We're going to attach the lining to the main side of your crown. So we're going to do this right sides together. So you're going to put your lining piece on top of your outer piece. So line them up right sides together, and we are going to just pop some pins or clips in to just hold it all in place. So I'm just going to pop one in each point of my crown. Now on the pattern piece there was some I'm just going to talk you through the next step. On the pattern piece there was some dotted lines, and this is just to show you where the stitch is going to be. So the pattern piece includes a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So as you can see, it meets in a point. So even though the edge of your tips of your crown are flat, it doesn't mean we're going to be sewing flat. We're going to be sewing a point, if that makes sense. So we're going to be sewing now all the way around the edge of our crown. We're going to be starting from about here, and we're going to be finishing up around about here. We need to leave a nice big gap along the bottom so we can turn our crown through. So we shall sew all the way along the tab, up and round, and then we've got lots of pivoting round corners to do as we go up and down the points of the crown. If you're not too sure about stopping at the right time, it'll be a good idea now to grab yourself a pencil or a fabric pen. I won't use my Sharpie again, I keep using a Sharpie, that is not good. Get a fabric pen or a pencil, and we're just going to make little dots 1 centimetre away from each of the corners. And that will remind you when sewing down that we've got to stop, and this is our pivot points on our needles. So we'll go through this in a second. If you're new to the club, hopefully you would have watched the first video which talks about pivoting around corners and how to do that, because we've got lots of pivoting around corners on this crown. So it might be worth just going along and marking with your pen those pivoting around the corner points. I've got another one just there that I missed. So let's get sewing. I'm going to plug my camera into a stand so you can see my sewing machine, and hopefully that will all make sense. Okay, so here's one of my start points. It's on the base of the crown because there's my end point. I'm going to line up my start point, and I'm going to be using that 1 centimetre seam allowance. So I've got 1 centimetre marked out on my sewing machine, so I know that that is where 1 centimetre away from the needle is. If you're unsure, then just grab a piece of masking tape. Ask a grown-up, or you might have some yourself, if you've got any masking tape, and you can see where that 1 centimetre seam allowance is by then measuring from where there's my needle. So I've got the tip of my needle, I've got the 0 mark just underneath where my needle hits, and I can see that there is 1 centimetre away, and I do have it marked out on my machine. If I put that masking tape on my machine just there, I know that the edge of the masking tape is 1 centimetre away from the tip of the needle. So then if I run, I'm going to put my presser foot down, and then I'm going to keep the edge of my fabric against the edge of the masking tape, and that will keep me running at a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So we always start off with a back stitch, and then we're going to sew all the way down to the first pivot point. So I'm going to stop 1 centimetre away from the edge of the fabric, and then I'm going to leave, my needle is in the down position. I'm going to pivot around that corner and put my presser foot back down, and I'm going to sew up to the next pivot point. So I know that that is now going to be 1 centimetre away from the edge. I'm going to stop, lift my presser foot up and pivot around that corner. I'm going to keep sewing, and I'm going to sew in to there, so that then the edge of the next straight piece of fabric is against the edge of the masking tape. Now I didn't mark a pivot point here, so I'm just going to do it now, about 1 centimetre away from the end, just to remind me that that's where I've got to pivot around. So I'm going to sew. Sorry for the camera wobbling, it's because it's attached to my table. There we go. So I've got to my first pivot point. I'm taking that pin out, and I'm going to, with my needle in the down position, lift the presser foot and just turn it around, so then that part of the point of the crown, that edge is running flat against my masking tape. So I'm sewing straight down this point all the way down to my next pivot mark. There it is. And then I'm going to lift the presser foot up. I'm going to take this pin out of the way. I'm just trying to zoom out a little bit. There we go. And then I'm going to sew all the way up, stopping 1 centimetre from the edge, pivoting around that corner, all the way down to the next point, and lifting that up, pivoting around that corner. Doesn't matter if your seam allowances are a little, oh, that one is quite far off. Let's go back and go down. I need to do 2 more stitches, I think. There we go. I'm going to lift that, because now, there we go, I've allowed myself a seam allowance of 1 centimetre when I go back up this straight edge. And then I'm going to stop 1 centimetre from the edge. And pivot back round. There we go. So hopefully this is all making nice sense for you. We're sewing up and down the points of the crown. We're doing it by pivoting around the corners. and keeping to a 1 centimetre seam allowance. I'm nearly there. Always remembering to lift the presser foot and always to stop a centimetre away from the edge. Okay, so now I'm just sewing around the last square part of the tab. So I'm going to stop at that pivot point, down to the next one, and then I can see my end dot. Can you see it's just there? So I'm on my last pivot and I'm going to sew up to the end dot. I'm going to do a little back stitch and there we go, cut the threads. If I just move my machine out the way, and we can see that we have sewn all the way around the edge of the crown and around that tab, and we've left the bottom bit open. Okay, so I'm now going to show you how to trim off the corners and the seam allowances and turn the crown around the right way. So once you have sewn all the way around your lining piece and your main piece, we just need to clip the corners. So this makes a nice sharp corner when we turn it the right way round. So you're going to cut the corners, just stopping a couple of millimetres away from the stitching. Okay, so it literally is just cutting off the corners of the fabric, but we need to leave a couple of millimetres away from the edge. If you want to, you can also trim your seam allowances down a little bit. Okay, and then where we've gone round a corner, we just want to cut into it, just so that there's some space when we turn around, so that the fabric doesn't pucker and it all turns nice and smooth. So I'm going to cut across that corner and I'm going to cut into that corner there. So I'm going to clip those corners. So each corner of the crown point is getting chopped off, and you'll see why when we turn it all the right way round in just a moment. It will all become clear, because you just need everything to lie nice and flat, or as flat as we can get it. So just keep cutting round. There we go. Okay. So there's another right angle there, so I'm just going to cut into that one. Cut some of that bulky seam allowance out the way, because we don't need it. And then there's a corner there. I'm going to cut across there. I'm going to cut across there, and I'm just going to chop that bit off there. Obviously, minding your fingers. You've got to be really careful, because the last thing we want to do is get blood on our pretty fabric. Okay, so we're going to turn this the right way out. Now, this is where you might need a sharp object. Not a sharp one, but something like a knitting needle or a chopstick. I'm just looking for my chopstick. I'm going to have to use a pencil and be really super careful, because I can't see where I've put my chopstick. Okay, we're going to turn this the right way out. So we need to push each corner of our crown through, And the tabs, they need pushing through. Okay, I'm going to use a pencil, but I'm a bit worried it's going to be a bit sharp and it might poke through. Ideally, you need to use a knitting needle or a chopstick. There we go, I poked my pencil through. You don't really want that to happen. So if you are using a pencil, make sure it's blunt. Mine is a little bit too sharp. It wasn't very organised. I should have gone and found my chopstick. Okay, so I'm just easing out those corners. But because we've cut the corners, there's less fabric to get in the way. And then I just need to do the same with each point of the crown. So you just keep doing this. I do have a plastic point turner somewhere. These things are never around when you need them. There you go. But do you see what I mean about cutting those corners? That one I don't think I've cut very well because I'm struggling to get the point out. It's not the end of the world, but okay, I'm just gonna but definitely take your time with this step. I'll keep poking through with my sharp pencil. And then once this is all poked through, we're going to ask a grown-up. Okay, I'm not going to do it all, but I'm just so you get the drift. I'm going to continue poking those last few bits through, because once they are all poked through and everything is as it should be, I'm going to use an iron. So ask a grown-up to help you with the iron, and we're going to press it all nice and flat. And then once we've done that, oh, there's my tab, we're going to be sewing around the edge. So go away and finish pulling out all of your corners and your tabs and give it a nice press so it's nice and flat, and we will be finishing off our crown. Okay, so I've just given that a press, and when I've pressed it with the iron, I folded under the open bit by 1 centimetre. So that's been folded under because that's our seam allowance that we didn't sew. So I folded that under so that the crown now looks like this. It's nice and flat, and we can now sew around the edges. So we're going to be doing what's called a top stitch. Now, top stitching is sewing on the outside of the fabric, and it's usually to hold something in place or to give it some shape. So we're going to be doing it firstly because it's going to sew up our hole as we sew along the bottom. So this hole that we left for turning, that's all going to be sewn up, and it's going to keep our points nice and sharp, and we're going to sew around all the way around the edge up to all of the points. So you just want to be 2 or 3 millimeters away from the edge. Just be careful when you get to the points. If they're bulky from all the fabric that's inside, just give it a little tug as you go through the sewing machine. I'll do a little demonstration on the machine as I go around mine, okay? Okay, so I'm going to start the top stitch along the bottom of the crown. So I sew up that hole first of all. Oh, I forgot to say, and I haven't done it myself, you can increase the stitch length on this. So if you're able to turn your stitch length up on your machine, and if you know how to do this, you can turn it up maybe to 3 millimeters. Don't worry if you don't know how to do it, it's not essential. But sometimes when you top stitch, you can increase your stitch length a little bit. So I'm currently just sewing that long straight edge along the bottom of the crown. Right, I'm just getting towards the tab. This is where I'm going to stop a few millimeters from the edge, pivot around that corner. and keep sewing. There we go. So lots more pivoting round corners. And this time, oh, I went a little bit too far. I'm just going to go back 2 stitches. We need to stop a couple of millimeters from the edge because we've got to then go up that straight edge. Now it feels quite bulky there because it's one of the points of my crown, but it's okay, my machine's handling it. It's got a bit stuck, so I'm just, there we go, sometimes it needs a little bit of a shove to get it going again. Okay, so I'm about 2 or 3 millimeters away from the edge of the crown. That's one of the points of the crown. There we go. So this is basically just going up and down the points of the crown, using the pivoting at each corner, minding your fingers with a needle, but just using your hands to push and guide your fabric through the machine. Because as we get more layers, and especially if there are bulky points, there's lots of fabric like in the corners of the crown, it does make it a little bit trickier to get through the machine. So it does need a little bit more of a help and a guidance with your hands. Okay, there we go. So I'm just gently top stitching my way around. In fact, I do believe I'm nearly finished. Oh, I thought that bit was getting... Right, my machine's come unthread, so I'm going to stop there and fix it. But then once I've nearly come to the end of my top stitching, so I'm just going to finish that little bit once I've rethread my machine. But continue top stitching, and we will be, all we've got left to do is attach the Velcro. Okay, so all that's left to do once you've done your top stitching, and if I just hold up, you can see the stitches that I've made around the edge of the crown. Okay, so all we've got left to do is to attach the Velcro. So we've got 2 sides. We've got a rough side and a soft side. We turn the crown over. We're going to attach the rough side to one side of the crown on the lining. And then the soft side we're going to attach to the outside of the crown, so that when it's all fastened, it all goes together nicely like that. Okay, so we need to attach that rough side to the lining edge of the crown, and we're just going to sew all the way around that rectangle, making sure you do a back stitch at the beginning and the end, and then that soft side will go on the main side of the crown, and again we're just going to sew all the way around the edge, making sure you do a back stitch at the beginning at the end so that that is securely sewn together. Okay, so I'm going to go and do that, and then we will have a look at the finished article. Okay, so I have now sewn on my Velcro, and I can do my crown up along those tabs that we sewn on beautifully earlier on today, and it is finished. So I hope you've all really enjoyed this project. As you can see, it's an adjustable size crown, and I hope that it's something you're going to enjoy wearing your winter crown over the festive period, or whenever you like, because to be honest, we can wear crowns whenever we really fancy. I hope that you've enjoyed it. If you are new to the Kids Sew 2 Club and you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to drop me an email at inquiries@littlemisssoandso.co.uk. And if you need your grown-ups to help with that, then do ask them and I will reply. But good luck. I hope good luck. Hopefully you've finished it, but hopefully you've enjoyed it, and please make sure you send me any pictures of your finished crown. I'd love to see it. Thanks, and we will see you again next month.